Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's New Look webinar. My name is Andrew Delaney, and I'll be your host. Today, we are talking about approaches to migrating market data to the cloud to drive agility in trading operations. Welcome. Today, we're going to be talking, obviously, cloud has become a reality for many aspects of the business. Financial information, market data, perhaps one of the last holdouts where people aren't quite so sure. So today we're going to talk about what people are really doing in the real world. We're looking at approaches to moving market data into the cloud. We'll be looking at what the mix of cloud options might be available to meet your needs, which types of data are best suited to cloud delivery, different cloud technologies, tools supporting market data distribution from cloud environments, and really to how to push market data delivery and performance to the limit. So that's going to be the topic we're talking about today for the next 50 minutes or so. We're always keen to hear from you. We will ask you to respond to a few poll questions in the course of the discussion, and you should feel free to ask questions of our distinguished panel. Speaking of which, I'm going to ask our distinguished panel to introduce themselves now. So first off, welcome to Richard Croucher of Barclays. Welcome, Richard. Tell us a bit about yourself and your interest in data in the cloud.
Hi, Andrew, and hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Richard Croucher from Barclays. I'm Global Head of Engineering for Specialized Infrastructure at Barclays. So my team is responsible for delivering market data across the bank. We run various ticker plants for doing that. We run all the colo sites. We host all the high-frequency trading platforms. So keen interest in where the markets are going, particularly in terms of are they going to the cloud? Well, more likely when they're going to the cloud rather than if they're going to the cloud. So yes, deeply interested in that. Barclays has a cloud-first strategy. So by default, all our new systems should go to the cloud, and that's the default position. We do have systems which that's a challenge for the moment, and we're dive into some of the issues around market data in particular during the discussions today, I'm sure. So thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Richard. Thanks for joining us. Next up, Matt Eddy of Refinitiv. Hi, Matt. Welcome. Same thing. Tell us about yourself and what your interest is in this space.
Thanks very much, Andrew, for having me. So Matt Eddy, based in London, works for Refinitiv, newly acquired by LSEG, so we're now an LSEG business. And very much just like what Richard said, vast majority of my week is spent talking about the cloud with customers internally, pushing our own products forward, making sure that they're fitting the needs of our customer base. So hopefully between the group that we've got here, a lot of different opinions. I think it should be a really entertaining panel. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again. Thanks for joining us. Peter Williams, CJC. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Andrew. So Peter Williams, CTO at CJC. We are very interested in the whole cloud movement, and we've been working actively in that space for a number of years now. We're a consultancy, a global consultancy, that are focused on helping people design, build, implement, manage, and kind of innovate for real-time market data systems. And that's obviously dovetailing nicely with a lot of people's strategy now for moving towards cloud, and that's a huge part of our business now.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Next up, Matthew Lompriere of BSO. Welcome, Matthew.
Hi, thank you, Andrew, and great to be here. My name is Matthew Lompriere. I run the business in the UK, Middle East and Asia for BSO Network Solutions. I'm also based in London. I've just actually moved here from Asia. I've had 20 years out in Asia, and just moved to London before Christmas and before quarantine. So it was good time to move. BSO provides global low latency and high performance networks for a variety of industries, but predominantly the financial service industries. And we use technologies such as millimeter and microwave for our ultra low latency services through global low latency and diverse fibers. But also clearly, because of today, we have a large presence in cloud access. We offer access to all the big cloud providers, and we are seeing a big uptake in interest in people wanting safe, secure, deterministic and low latency access to clouds and cloud to cloud, so one cloud to another. So particularly as all the new market data streams come online, it's an interesting time for market data in the cloud. So looking forward to today's discussion.
Absolutely, it is a very interesting time for market data in the cloud. I hosted another webinar on this topic just before Christmas, and we've got a lot of interest in this space from what we do. So I agree, and lots of challenges and opportunities. Let's see. So next up we have Mark Etherington. Mark from Crux Informatics. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks very much indeed. Pleased to be here. As I said, I'm Mark Etherington. I'm the CTO of Crux Informatics. Prior to that, I spent probably about 25 years in major banks running low latency engineering, building private clouds, and doing an awful lot of market data. I was at Refinitiv running a bunch of trading until recently, and at that stage I joined Crux. And Crux is completely cloud-based already. We specialize in trying to make sure that we can get data from any supplier to any client in any way they can. We're seeing a lot of focus on the cloud, which is going to be useful for the conversation. I look forward to the next 50 minutes.
Brilliant. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. Thanks so much. Right, so we're gonna get into our conversation with the panel in just a moment. Before we start that, we're going to run a poll. This will be through the Slido on your screen. So please do take a moment to answer the question. The question for this poll is, what do you see as the greatest internal barrier to migrating market data and other mission critical information to cloud-based environments? You've got 5 options there. Please select one. We'll come back and see how you voted in a few minutes. So while the audience is looking at that and thinking about it, let's kick off our discussion and talk about the whys and wherefores of this. Start off with Mark, if I may. So Mark, why are firms looking at cloud as a delivery mechanism for market data? Let's talk about some of the benefits and that one would hope to enjoy from this approach.
Sure. Yeah, no problems. Thank you. Look, I guess it's not just market data, yeah? I mean, market data means many things to many people, yeah? It's basically a huge continuum of latency that kicks in here. So I think we're going to span from, tick data, which is obviously you're down at millisecond if you can even lower than that, all the way through to, frankly, annual updates, yeah? Now, finance community needs all of that. I think what's interesting is we've certainly seen cloud has been around for actually quite a while now. Not as long as people think, but it's been around for a significant amount of time. And people know the benefits of cloud, at least theoretically. So everyone put their toes in the water with things like computation. The trouble is with data, as we all know, data and computation typically like to go hand in hand. Now, the movements have changed over the years, so it's much more about actually having data near the compute that you can. So as people are trying to get a lot of benefit out of the cloud, they're finding that actually either reaching back into their own organizations is somewhat painful, or they actually have to get the data to the cloud. Now, this becomes a little bit problematic, So what we've seen is certainly COVID is triggered, I think, an acceleration to people wanting or acceptance that people can actually work a lot more in the cloud. We've seen this in terms of remote working, but it's also come through in terms of the back office systems. Now, as people consider moving to the cloud, what we've seen, and this has played very well to our proposition, to be honest, is that actually there's a number of steps. I know we're going to explore some of those. The one I'm really interested in is making sure that the data that you're either receiving today or you want to receive in the future is in the cloud. Now, you're going to put it there for a number of reasons, not least of fact is the amount of scale that you need to get out of it. I've run storage at a number of the major banks. If you look at the cost structure associated just with storage and did a real TCO of what it was really costing you to get that megabyte of data stored in internal systems, the cloud's been a no-brainer for years. As acceptance has actually increased in terms of security and access, and frankly, the services around it, it's become more compelling. The problem then becomes how do you get the suppliers to get the data to the cloud? Because it's one thing for you to want to go to the cloud, but you're reliant on an ecosystem. Now, we're going to touch on, I think, real time, and that's a specific challenge in this space. It's getting better. But there's also the vast majority of the data that you need to run your organizations and to trade even. It's not just the prices. You're going to need things like security masters and currency tables and back office operations files, all of this type of stuff. Getting suppliers to adopt the cloud is not a trivial undertaking. We talk, and it's great to see Eddie from Refinitiv. I used to be at Refinitiv for a couple of years, Eddie, but they're big companies. They have big resources. They have big ambitions. There's thousands of small data providers that everyone's trying to get niches of that don't. There are people out there that don't have the technologists, or if they have the technologists, they don't have the focus because they've got other things to do for their business. So persuading the raft of individuals that need to get data to you to do your business can be problematic. What we've seen is that Flux is helping the migrations to the cloud in more cases than not, because we take all the data from suppliers in the way that they do it today, and we present it in any of the clouds. As a supplier, you've got to do business continuity. You've got to make sure you're monitored. You've got to upgrade the entitlement systems to talk and distribute data. If you can't do all of those things, or you want to do those things, but you don't have the resources to do it, you need to find a mechanism. And if they don't find a mechanism, then the consumer is really cool, because the consumer can't get the data they need to do their cloud migrations. So it's one thing to get to the cloud, but you don't want to be piping into your old legacy and then pushing it to the cloud. You need to get the data that you want coherently, consistently, and in the right, if you like, the operational characteristics into the system itself. Bit of a long answer, but basically get the supplier's data to the cloud in the easiest way you can. We try to help do that and then consume it in a standard way on the back end.
Matthew, let's bring you into the conversation. In terms of when you're out talking to your clients, what are the drivers? What benefits are they seeing?
Yes, so Mark's given a very detailed answer to the previous question. So I think the benefits that they're seeing, particularly Asian-based clients where office and data center space is at a premium and very limited, to be able to get physical equipment out of their offices and out of data centers into the cloud is certainly one of them. So the old CapEx versus OpEx conversation, but just the physical size. I mean, in the UK, that challenge isn't quite as extreme, but it's certainly there as well. It's giving huge compute resources to some smaller firms that wouldn't normally be able to get access to those types of resources as well. And it's really allowing people to scale up and down much more flexibly than they have been able to in the past, particularly for things like wargaming or testing of software. Very important to get quality data and be able to spin that up and down in a short period of time. So there's a lot of benefits that people are seeing from use of the cloud at the moment. I think similar to what Mark was saying, where BSO come into play with that is that we offer that secure and private infrastructure, which allows their data to get from the data sources that Mark was talking about into any cloud pretty much anywhere in the world.
Do you think the pandemic has accelerated interest in this space?
It certainly has. I mean, again, as Mark was saying, it's not just market data, but with people hosting trading platforms now in the cloud, voice trading turrets in the cloud, with everyone now working at home, certainly over in Western world, it's made a huge difference and it's really accelerated. So I was talking to one of our clients the other day and they were saying that that was their CTO, and he was saying that he'd managed to push projects through that he'd had in the plans for 2 years, and he got them pushed through in a couple of months just because of the change in workforce. So it's the impact has been dramatic.
Very good. We'll sort of dig into some of that in a bit more in a moment. Let's look at those Slido poll results. If you recall, the question was internal barriers to migrating market data and other mission critical information to cloud-based environments. And it seems that the clear winner of the biggest barrier is sensitivity around managing data out of house. Anyone from the panel keen to remark on this finding?
Of minded knowing if we had another answer there, maybe that we don't see any barriers, because it might have been quite interesting to see where that played against that, because I think probably a year or two ago this was absolutely the case. From the interactions we've had with our customer base, it's sort of scaled down a little bit now. I think people feel a lot more confident and comfortable with moving data off premise.
Yeah, I think as long as the data is managed, I think, as you say, I think it's less of an issue now. I think people understand clouds and are happy that you can kind of set perimeters up within the cloud to manage your data, to manage your systems. So I think it's more understandable and is much more of a contained risk now. So it shouldn't really be an inhibitor.
Yeah, it boils down to how good your governance is. You know, do you need to have, as you said, isolated, siloed off areas where you don't get data leakage between one pod or another? So I think it's all far better understood than it used to be, for sure.
I think just as an aside, I think I'm sort of with Eddie. I would love you to have seen what that survey would look like 18 months ago. Yeah, it's probably like 150% were concerned about their data entitlements. I think people have got to understand, I think, over time, is a lot of this is in the lack of education. Frankly, the cloud providers, despite all of the high profile, if there's an issue, there's a high profile incident and it makes the news, yeah, the cloud providers are a lot more secure than the vast majority of any of the consumers of data, to be honest. And the controls are better in many cases. I think the point that's core is the entitlements and the control that's being made now. You've got to have strong entitlements. Suppliers are very keen on this, because that's how they make their money, is the licensing of the data. Consumers have privacy concerns more than anything else, but they're all addressable, I think, to the points being made.
Very good. Well, we're going to come back to that governance entitlements element a bit later on. In the meantime, we've got another poll for you. So let's see. The next poll is which data types represent the low-hanging fruit in terms of cloud adoption? So same thing, please let us know your thoughts on that, and we'll come back to that after the next question. And I'll turn back to our panel and come to you, Richard, if I may. This sort of relates, so we'll see if the audience agree. Is the public cloud a viable proposition for delivery of real-time market data? Is the potential for applying vast data sets to trading analytics real? Is it viable? Richard?
So kind of yes and no. I think mostly for human consumers of that data, it's definitely not for HFT. Not until the matching engines move to the cloud. HFT's got to be close to the matching engines. I think where it really scores is kind of in the data enrichment and the analytics. So that's really helpful. The scale up, being able to do that. So I think there's a lot of great research work you can do where you're wanting to take those views. I think the scale up and scale down, everybody talks about that for cloud, but you know, the work you're doing has got to be able to accommodate the time the cloud takes to scale up and scale down. You know, it takes seconds at best, usually minutes, to scale up. For our systems, for many of our critical ones, certainly anywhere near the front end and HFT, we can't even afford the 20 microseconds to power up a call. let alone to start up a new instance. So there's a spectrum of apps, I think, and of consumers as to where they sit on that latency line. The further back you are, the better, and they're the greater benefit you can reap for the scale up, scale down capabilities of the cloud. I think that's where they really excel.
Very good. Thank you. Matt, Refinitiv has every type of data under the sun. How do you see it?
I agree with what Richard was saying there. There's definitely use cases that are appropriate and use cases that aren't. But the 100% where we're seeing clients already actively moving across this, I think the subtlety is around the use cases that they're exploring. Again, HFT not applicable, but one of the pieces we're trying to have our customers understand, and a lot of the conversations around, is what use cases they have in a deployed scenario might not necessarily port across like for like into the cloud. It might be that there's different qualities of service of data. You know, you have to look at availability, mission criticality of that service. So case by case, I think we need to explore those, and then also the risk appetite of those particular customers that are looking to move. I think going back to your point around the trading analytics, so again, not always applicable for every analytics that you want to run, but it certainly does bring a lot of capabilities that customers are really excited about at the moment. You know, bringing the question to the data, not the other way around, as other people have already said before me. I think that's quite a good way of looking at it. You know, it's almost like with data lakes now, they're almost antiquated. You know, a couple of years ago, everyone was building them, and now you don't really want to be building your data lake on premise because you might be able to do it cheaper, quicker, and at scale in the cloud, or tapping into other people's data lakes, other vendors, and pulling that data remotely. We've launched our tick history in GCP, and that was exactly the reason for that. Rather than having to copy over large blocks of data into your environment, run the query remotely, get your data, get your analysis, and then drop off. So you don't have to corral, cleanse, you know, copy the data across. You can just run that query quickly and easily. So those are the kinds of things we're looking at, you know, building out platforms that people can interrogate rather than download data into, I guess.
Very good, thank you. Let's have a look at that poll result then. Let's see. So it looks like it's tick data and analytics and fundamental data, perhaps stepping back from the real-time stuff, unstructured alternative data. Does that surprise anybody on the panel?
No, that's what we're seeing today. I think it's interesting in terms of like, so tick data. Yeah, if you're trading, yeah, I'm with everybody else. Trading, it's hard today. There are ways of doing it, but it's hard today to stay in the cloud and be competitive for trading. That said, we currently ingest real-time trading information on prices for our suppliers and basically offer analytics products. So it's very similar to what Matt's talking about in terms of the approach. You're seeing two things here. One is there's so much data that the byproduct of the trading experience is that you need to keep that for other uses, which is effectively the tick repos and the histories and the regression test type stuff you want to do, back testing. Yeah, so that's extremely sympathetic to the cloud in terms of what we're doing here. The other half of the coin, though, to Matt's point, is like you've got sandbox type approaches, query type approaches, which we offer as well. But the interesting one I think that's really coming out is non-materialized sharing. So these are the snowflakes of the world, the big queries of the world, where we'll see Microsoft and Amazon going as well. The ability for anybody to put data in, as long as you know what you're doing, and to share that, not just as a query, but to actually manifest it in the endpoint. And I think, frankly, Snowflake have done a huge credit to the industry by highlighting the abilities there. But there are obviously others that can actually do the same thing as well. And that's where the real energy is going to be with all this data, I think.
Very good. Okay, let's move on to the next question. I'll throw this one out to Matthew initially. Will firms need to retain on-premises platforms, data center hosted high-performance servers, and private cloud instances? And if so, what are the practical considerations for managing this kind of hybrid delivery infrastructure? Matthew.
Yes, so I would say definitely yes, and most of the panel have already given some of the reasons why already. Certain, particularly low latency or latency sensitive trading needs to be on dedicated infrastructure until the matching engines go into the cloud. I think Richard was talking about that earlier. The particularly the HFTs use dedicated FPGAs, dedicated servers. They're not going to be, migrating that into a cloud onto generic infrastructure anytime soon. Particularly as that also takes them one further step away from the co-locations. Managing the hybrid environment, there are plenty of companies out there that can help you to do that. Some of the smaller ones may not have those skills in-house, but certainly the HFTs, I'm sure, will have the skills in-house to manage that technology challenge. Partner with the right infrastructure provider to give you that low latency and the private cloud and the colo facilities, and then you can get your cloud access as well for the other sources of data. But yeah, resounding yes, answer to that question.
Very good. Let's throw this one to Matt as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Resounding yes. I think there'll be an inflection point where potentially cloud is the de facto location to launch everything, and some customers are already there. Some of our big financial services players and some of the more agile ones as well. But the general consensus is a bit more of a cautious approach. So they want to explore cloud in a low risk way, experience what the cloud is like, the capabilities. But then they also want that sort of seamless integration back in. So touching upon your hybrid mode there, the experience or the barrier to entry for moving applications across has got to be incredibly low to facilitate that work and to get confidence internally as well that this is the right thing to go and do. So that kind of then touched upon probably the last point, which is around, whilst some have sort of taken this opportunity to re-platform, refactor their application and work quite aggressively with the cloud providers to reuse native cloud capabilities, there's a lot that are just lifting and shifting because it's the easy thing to do. You don't get all of the benefits, but you're adhering to the corporate mantra. You're moving across to the right direction. You're buying yourself time to actually do that refactoring and take proper advantage. And I think that's why there's going to be, well, hopefully beyond my career, there'll still be on-premise platforms still there, but how much of those are there versus how much they're leveraging their peer networks in the cloud. That's what I'm working on at the moment, is how that balance shifts across the next couple of years.
Very good.
Can I add to that, Andrew?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so I think platforms like Kubernetes provide a kind of normalization layer, which it enables you to much more easily move your applications across a hybrid environment. So I think what we're seeing now is a lot more kind of normalization and standardization around developing apps to running Kubernetes and then being able to run those on an on-prem Kubernetes or in any of the cloud providers. So I think there's a much stronger move towards that standardization rather than using cloud proprietary solutions, which has been a hindrance there.
Really agree. I mean, it's interesting on the Kubernetes side. So they used to run a whole chunk of DevOps at the banks. Yeah, and it was also a lot of homebrew type stuff. It's been an absolute joy joining, obviously Crux, where everything was done with Kubernetes to start with. It's liberating. Yeah, the ability to actually run the infrastructure to scale out when you want without having to go through hoops is like one of the bigger benefits of moving to the cloud, without a doubt, I think.
But you can do exactly the same on-prem. So
absolutely.
Yep.
I think that's where the hybridization factor comes in, because when you're running stuff across cloud and on-prem, which is, it's going to be the way of things for a while. I think the next challenge as well is when you're hybridizing across multiple clouds. So, the challenges of these underlying different technology stacks doesn't go away. It's just reframed somewhat. So how do you then exploit when a provider gives you a technical or a commercial advantage? So when we look at stuff like this, You don't want to end up with islands of technology that are kind of isolated and limiting factors for you. You need standardized, policy-based, coordinated service provisioning and management, and that all has to kind of sit above the technical implementation. So when we look at these kind of challenges, we tend to try and split things into sort of 3 layers. You've got the control layer, which is where you worry about your role-based permissioning, your ownership, your audit. That's all kind of at high level. State management, which is your configuration, your cloud resources. And then you've got the integration layer, and that's really, how do you deploy and manage? And obviously how you deploy and manage will vary from cloud to cloud. So how you go and deploy a particular workload in AWS versus Google versus anywhere versus on-prem, that changes. So you have to be able to kind of split that up. When you do that, that allows you to abstract your monitoring and your day 2 management. I mean, we're talking about deployment, but once these things are live and in the wild and operating, you've got to be able to manage them for their life cycle. And if you can abstract that away and get your monitoring and your management independent of these things, that gives you a lot more flexibility under the covers. And that gives your company optionality for how they approach technology, so they can make decisions about what's the best fit for the requirements, as opposed to kind of being corralled towards a particular technology type that perhaps is suboptimal.
I mean, Peter, I completely agree. I mean, one of the challenges, or one of the big challenges we said about getting suppliers to get to the market. So if you're a big aggregator, a Refinitiv, a Bloomberg, an ICE type of stuff, you've got the resources to do this. But if I look at what we have to do every day, I run a huge data lake inside of Google. I use BigQuery extensively. I feed effectively Snowflake running in Amazon to distribute a Snowflake network. I connect into Microsoft to talk to Synapse and their blobs, and all of that has to be engineered. So when you take a step back and you go back to the smaller players in the market, the countless smaller players that have the data that's of interest to give the firms an edge, providing the capability to do all of that we think is a great market opportunity, not only for ourselves, but for others. But it also becomes clear that the scale of the engineering doesn't go away. It's got a lot easier, I think, with Kubernetes. But you have to also think as a consumer, keep an eye on what the suppliers have to do to service you in order to make all of that work. And it becomes quite a big challenge for them to keep up with the consumers. And that's going to become a frustrating experience if they don't do it, I think.
Yeah, and from a service provisioning standpoint as well, it's how do you structure the delivery of service around these technologies? Having the technology is great. If you've got antiquated kind of operate models, you're never going to achieve all the benefits there. You're going to have this one kind of, sticking out like a sore thumb that doesn't quite map, that isn't as efficient. So how you deliver the services is just as crucial.
Yeah, I really agree.
Very good. Okay, thank you. We're getting quite a few questions from the audience, actually. So this is earlier than I thought I was going to, but I think I'm going to throw some of them out to the panel. If that's everyone's warmed up now, right? Feel warmed up. Good. So some kind of big picture questions and some more detailed ones. So first one up is how do the guys deal with data licensing and storing data on the cloud from a governance standpoint? Would anyone like to take a stab at that? Matt looks like he does.
Yeah, that's probably the hardest question you come up with first.
How did you come up with it?
Exactly. I mean, there's a lot of issues that we're discovering as we go on this as well, right? It's a bit of a learning journey for all in terms of how the data is going to be used, how it's going to be exploited, and then also critically how the venues, how the exchanges interpret that as well, because they're also learning about these new deployment patterns and how the applications might be consuming them. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges we face, is articulating the morphing of a deployed scenario through hybrid and out into cloud, the use cases that might be adopted from that. There's still going to be the same application workflows, the same business logic, but it might be through different premises. It might be dispersed across multiple cloud providers. That is a real challenge to articulate. So that's one aspect. The other aspect really just then goes back to being able to report audit, govern that data, because we're obviously built out tools to try and control that. But whilst our customers are the ones that are really, they're accountable for the statements, they're not necessarily also understanding exactly what they're doing all the time either, because as you have all of these different pods of entrepreneurship popping up, it's a little bit hard to wrangle all of that data. So being able to have that control, that audit, that entitlement management, all the way through the system, be able to knit that back into what they're doing in a deployed scenario, back through billing, that's a challenge.
Do you think that this whole pandemic thing and work from home has sort of really pushed this thing to the fore?
I think so a little bit, but I think these challenges were there beforehand, and I don't think we've as a business, as an industry, have really solved it yet, because I think there's a lot of people still working on them. I think everyone likes to put COVID as sort of the reason that we're now much more cloud friendly, but I think we were going there anyway. It sped that process up a little bit, but I think it would have happened anyway, and I think these challenges are just probably hitting us a little bit sooner than we thought they would do.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to add just to that. I've seen some things coming out of some of the regulators as well over the last few months, and I think as an industry we probably need to engage better with the regulators to actually educate them on the technology and actually what is available and how it works, because I don't think that's happened to the full extent that it maybe could have done. So I think there's an important thing there that we need to work very closely with all the regulators to make sure that the particularly data sovereignty and other rules are understood and we can deliver against them. So I think that's it's worth.
That's a great point. Yeah.
But it's another example of where, in my view, this all becomes less of a technology challenge, because I'm supremely confident in the technology that it will go the right way and allow people to consume and publish in all of these new ways. But where the real challenges and the opportunities live, in my mind, is around how do you commercialize it. It's like the new opportunities for different delivery models, commercial models. How do you, again, entitle, govern, like all of that kind of has to run and catch up now behind the tech. So it's more of a commercial and a contractual challenge in some respects than it is a technology challenge.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting to experience. I mean, I used to be in real time a lot, and we're further up the stack. We're not doing tick by tick. I mean, licensing constructs need to evolve. Vendor of record, your rules for exchanges must be the bane of your life, Matt, because I mean, I know it was bane of my life when I was sitting in the businesses, but it's also an enabler. I mean, what we're finding is we try to avoid the issue full stop. Yeah, I act as an agent for the client, doing basically wrangling their data to their specification, which is basically just doing the job for them. It's not a derivative work, it's their work just done by elsewhere. And on the other side, we act as the agent for the supplier if they want the wrangle, the file split up to go out to someone. And we always ask permission from the supplier, the owner of the data, to do the distribution. And the trouble is, if you're a reseller in any form of what that imagination and aggregators typically are, that's a much bigger problem to cater for. And it's a little bit interesting with the exchanges. It's not the aggregators' fault, it's the exchanges that sit underneath this as well. I think licensing as a whole needs a bit of a revamp, and there's a lot of vested interest in not doing that revamp in many cases. So I think it's like it's going to be the bane of our life that we'll be discussing in 10 years' time. It won't be the cloud, it's going to be the licensing constructs are still not going to be caught up with what's going on here.
Yeah, it's actually a good point, because then the exchanges are always looking to monetize their own content in the cloud as well now. So you
bypass everybody, yeah. So yeah. It's the whole point.
But within a lot of organizations, you're going to get this kind of headbutting against each other of the old ways being disrupted by the new ways, and saying, well, we don't want to encourage this kind of new behavior because we may cannibalize what we've already got. But the disruption bus will come along, and you're either going to be on it or hit by it, and that's the truth of it.
There's a lot of people that want to do it as well, to be fair. It's
true, but I think that's probably the slightly more the people on the outside who want to go and disrupt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got a question here. Again, we've got lots of questions to get through. So I'm staying off piece because I think these are really on point. Could each of the panelists comment on their views around data provenance? Not only where the data came from originally, but where it has been since that time, who handled it previously, and how it could be identified. And could blockchain technology play a role in data provenance? Anyone got any thoughts on data provenance in this context?
I give you a real case.
Sorry, go on, Mark.
No, sorry, please, Matt, go for it.
No, I was just going to say that sounded like that question was aiming towards blockchain, and it came in at the end. So, I've worked on projects in a previous life looking at blockchain identifiers to identify things like a stake and where a stake has been on its entire journey from the cow to the farm to the processor, and it's exactly the same situation. So, yes, I think blockchain is an excellent tool for that. Sometimes I do feel that blockchain is a solution looking for a problem, but I think this is a great example where if you have your data stored on a blockchain, you do have that provenance all the way through.
Do you think blockchain can cope with the kind of volumes, though? I mean, I see blockchain being really useful for contracts and things like that, but for any high volume of data,
not yet.
I think we're struggling. I'm not sure we know how to solve that.
Yeah, not yet. I guess over time it will change. The technology changes, but yeah, not at the moment for sure.
So look, I think blockchain, in tongue in cheek, is distributed ledger's great technology. Blockchain, I'm sort of with both of you, it's going to take a while to do that. But on a practical basis, the reason I was smiling is that yes, the major client has an issue. Now the issue is not with me, I hope. Okay, the issue is actually with the data supplier. And it's interesting how the web that we weave, in terms of everything that's out there. The client gives a supplier data. It appears back as a data feed at some stage. All sound familiar to a number of the bankers on the call, I suspect. But when that data is given out, we then take that data back in from the supplier and give it back to the client. The client's like, my data's not there. And it's like, oh, so what do you need to do to solve that problem? Provenance. And tangible provenance, however it's maintained. So we stamp the data with a delivery ID. We have to go back to which raw file did that come from the supplier on what date? When did clients submit the data to the supplier independently? That time stamping that we take for not sort of for granted, but when you diagnose like trading chains and HFT to try and work out exactly where the time is being spent a bit, has to go on big chunks of data through your system in order to diagnose when these things go wrong, because there's so many different connections that you're not aware of. I wasn't even aware that the client was contributing this data set into this supplier, which would come back 2 days later looking at something else. So that full circle type of chaining and identifying where the data is a practical necessity to actually work out what the hell is going on and how things are, this data begets this data, which begets that data. It's actually quite important just from a normal operational perspective.
I mean, we end up having to use pretty expensive forensic capture devices just so we can evidence who sent us what when, particularly when downstream systems complain something's missing. We can trace back along the pipeline and see, well, where did it get dropped, or did we receive it in the first place?
Stakes are high. And it's not just trading data, If you got you use the wrong FX rate, or there's something dropped somewhere, you need to be able to diagnose this stuff. So provenance, I think, is critical to make sure it's in your chain.
Okay, thank you all. I'm going to do one more audience question, and then we'll see how we're doing at the end, because there's a couple of items I do want to get to from our prepared questions. This question actually covers off one of them we prepared, but it's got more colour to it. From Chris Allison of City Hub, who says hi to some of his old friends on the panel. Don't know who he means there, but anyway. What is the panel's best guess on timeframes to see major matching engines shifting to the cloud?
That's a good question, isn't it?
Yeah.
One of our questions was around Singapore. I mean, Singapore Exchange has piloted a colo type solution on AWS with Aquis, the matching engine. So there's a sort of proof of concept out there. What about the big guys?
I think it's going to take several years. I mean, the huge problem is fairness. You know, traditionally we've used multicast to give everybody the same data at the same time. At Chris, they did a POC and they did use multicast there, which was interesting. Generally, all the cloud providers use SDN to manage their networks. So that's flow-based management. And that multicast completely conflicts with that. So it means they have to make fundamental changes in order to deploy that. So it comes down to a willingness on their side. Are they willing to do that? I think a lot of the exchanges want to go to cloud. NASDAQ in particular have been very vocal about saying that they are going. So it's a matter of when, but I think we're looking at least 2 or 3 years out for any of the major venues. There's kind of other issues as well to solve, things like accuracy and provenance of timestamps. We need to know. Certainly, MiFID requires us to reference any timestamp we generate back to either the GPS satellite systems or a national clock, and the cloud providers just don't understand that at this time. So technically they could do it. How long it's going to take them to understand and actually do that, we don't know. So issues there. I think we used to see a lot of issues around jitter, which made it really difficult. I think as they've moved away from virtualization to more native levels of hosting, with things like Nitro and things like that, that's got better. So I think some of those are going away. So I think over time the issues will go away, and I think it will become possible. But I think we're looking at a multi-year journey still.
Anyone else? Any?
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. One thing that I was talking to a client the other day, and he raised, because we were actually talking about this very subject, and he raised a question with me, which was, okay, so you've got your traditional matching engine providers today, but what happens when Google produce their own? You know, and then the big matching engine providers are no longer needed. And you know, you think that the queries that they run, the AI they've got, the ad matching that they do already, they are matching engines.
But anybody can write a matching engine. It's not hard.
Yeah.
But the question is, does it attract liquidity?
To do it the other way, Richard, to take a step back, it's like I mean, I remember being in the arms race every day, yeah, with this stuff. It wasn't a question of how fast the venues worked. It was a question of you wanting to be faster. Yeah, it's just like if the venue was, I mean, the venues could frankly be really slow as long as they're fair.
But so it's fairness, isn't it? It's the critical thing. As long as you all get the data at the same time, then
equally slow okay. is as good as equally fast. Yep. Exactly. Yep. So the question I think Peter may have asked earlier, it's like it's a question of whether you lift and shift, yeah, or whether you will. So I think you will see new venues coming out that do use the cloud, probably in a 3 to 5, yeah, and they won't have the issues because they won't be doing lifting and shifting. They need to get the liquidity. So if the usual gig, if the banks got together and did another consortium for another type of exchange, that could be based on that type of technology, attract the liquidity, and it could be made fair without porting the technology across. I mean, there's a usual adage that you always say 5 to 10 years as any answer to any question, because it's if you're right, people remember, it's clue enough to remember. If you're wrong, everyone's forgotten. But it's like this one feels like a 3 to 5. You're going to see something happen because not all of the matching engines are very good, to be honest, either. Yeah, we all know that. So if they have to go through a technology refresh, then if they're long as they've got the right insight, that's an opportunity. It's the same opportunity for an in-house system being converted to cloud native, yeah, versus lift and shift. There's an opportunity, I think, for the big players to actually do something quite massive, but it's still going to take time.
And don't forget that most of the crypto exchange is already in the cloud.
Yeah, that's all.
They have to be, yeah.
already there.
Right, gents, we're running out of time, so I do want to get to at least one more question. I'm going to throw this one at Peter, and it's really something that sort of we talk about migration to the cloud. So how should people go about this? What are the steps involved? What are the pitfalls they should be looking out for? Start with you, Peter.
Yeah, so if you've seen me on panels before, I've got fairly strong views on this one. I think people have sometimes misconceptions about what it means to go to the cloud. People say move and lift and shift, and that kind of fills me with dread. I think the main pitfall is if you don't benefit your target benefits effectively. What do I want to achieve in doing this? And then if you say, oh, I'm going to just lift and shift, I think what you end up with is no benefits and only risks. So what you're doing is lifting and shifting your problems. What you really need to do, and what we try and apply with our customers, is understand your business drivers and have clear targets for your outcomes. And then once you've got those, you need to consider things in 3 key areas. So first of all, we sort of bracket this under suppliers. So understand what the cloud can offer you, understand the technology, and then understand the difference between each cloud provider. So, will you just go and dump something you've always run on a VM? Or are you going to look at maybe containerizing? Or are you going to be looking at cloud functions or Lambda? Are you really going to take advantage of all of these kind of, advances? Now, will you look at cloud native solutions? Do your service providers, are you working with people, and can their services, like I said earlier on, can their services mesh into a cloud delivery? Can they be more, demand driven? And then your second area is systems and consumers, right? So first of all, you have to understand what's out there. Secondly, you have to really understand what your workloads and what your kind of internal consumers, what do they want? What are they interested in? What do they require? And then it's about getting the right technologies and matching those two, I'm talking about matching engines, right? Matching technology to requirements. So, we're talking about continuums of latency and performance and trading and matching engines. It doesn't always have to be at that high level. It can be, it can be once a day updates or, conflated or whatever. It doesn't matter. And then the other consideration beyond the technical with that is, how do you automate it? How can you get day 2 management? How can you, again, embrace not just the technology, but how you deliver and work with it? And then the third area is governance. And this is key. So understanding commercial and regulatory obligations. So what's your FinOps strategy going to be? How are you going to manage, monitor, assign, analyze these new costs and keep track of them? Can you have control through automation where you can have, kind of zero trust access or management? And then that opens up new opportunities around, I said, entitlements, digital rights management, the commercial structures. So really it's understand what's available, understand your requirements and how your business is going to judge success, marry those two up, and then have that wrapped in good, solid governance that allows you to get better control of your commercial, better control of your service, and ultimately give you a great starting point to go and embrace what comes in the future.
Very good, thank you. That's very comprehensive. Matt, do you have anything to add to
that? I completely agree with what Peter said there, luckily. So the only thing I'd possibly add to that is start now. Yeah. Because everybody else is, and it's mature enough. If you're not comfortable or you don't have the budget, start small. Do some proof of concepts, analyze your application base, work out what their requirements are, the complexity, maybe put them into easy, medium, and hard buckets, and focus on trying to sell that internally, and then work through getting all of the logistics and all of the plumbing and all of the connectivity in place as well, because that's where we've seen most of the headaches, to be honest, is actually understanding what your cloud security requirements are, opening up firewalls, please, please, please allow inbound connectivity from vendors. It makes my life so much easier. You know, those sorts of things. And if they don't, do they go into a secured landing zone? How do you get access to that? You know, how can you start to interact with that data? Get some confidence built up, and then you're ready to go when the call comes, I guess.
I couldn't agree more. Like, if you haven't already started doing this, you're going to miss out. I honestly believe that. Like, new ways of analyzing, buying, selling data are already here. They're going to keep arriving, and it's going to keep growing. And you get within market data, I honestly feel like there are a lot of people who kind of pay lip service to cloud. Oh yeah, we're doing this in cloud. Oh yeah, we're doing that. I think over the next sort of, you know, the coming months and years, those people are going to get found out, because the people that are really doing it are going to start disrupting, and it's going to come fast, and it's going to be fairly sweeping. I mean, we're working with people already, full automation of deployment and management of like complex real-time systems, cloud native solutions like PubSub and BigQuery. We're working with people right now to deliver solutions that give flexible, real-world solutions for the business. And again, like I said, entitlements, reporting, analysis, all of this is being done whilst also working out the new commercial models. Like, if you're just starting out now, you've got to really push the button, because, you know, it's moving already.
Very good. So disrupt, bust, or get run over by it, basically. Mark, 30 seconds.
That's good. Sure. I guess start and then leverage your cloud provider. I mean, I would, to leverage off some of the points that Matt was writing under the covers, go get a really good chief information security officer that understands the cloud, understands balancing of risk. Is probably the number one thing. Now, there's a lot of people out there that do know this, which is great. I'm not disparaging about that, but they're a key player in making sure that your risk posture is understood and used. And you should use your cloud providers extensively to leverage their knowledge base. They know how to show you what's secure and what's not, but you need someone on your side to face off to them, and then go sort your suppliers out, or better still, come and get me to sort your suppliers out.
Very good.
That's actually a really good point, Mark, because I think the cloud providers obviously have a vested interest in making this a success. They've spent a lot of money hiring people that can sell this vision internally into your firms, and they're happy to go and do it. So leverage those wherever possible.
Just like to throw advice from Matthew, Richard. Matthew, very briefly.
Yeah, I mean, it's Peter, I think, covered everything really well there. I think the important thing is figure out why you're trying to do this, understand which applications and which databases you can move into a cloud and which you need to keep on-prem. And as Mark was saying, speak to the right people to make it happen. So, you know, that's one of the things that BSO does is work with clients to deliver their data in and out of, as the cloud providers, as I said earlier. And it's really important that you engage the right technology partners and the right risk people, as Mark was saying, to make sure it's all legal and above board. But yeah, get going now, definitely.
Brilliant. Last word, Richard, in terms of advice.
I think it's a matter of trying to make your applications as agnostic as possible, and your on-prem systems to match the cloud platforms as close as possible, so that you can move things to the right place at the right time. I think it's really hard at the moment to predict where that right place is going to be in a year's time, 2 years' time, 3 years' time. So it's a matter of trying to keep those options open. If it makes sense to run some stuff on-prem, run it on-prem. If it makes stuff to run it on cloud, do so. But be prepared to be able to move it quickly and at short notice.
Very good. Okay, we're out of time. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Excellent session. So many points there. We should write all these down somewhere, which I'm sure we will. So thanks to all of you for your excellent contributions today. I've been asked to draw everyone's attention to a few bits and pieces that A-Team are doing. We have a market data management webinar on May 25th. We have our Trading Tech Summit, July 21st, hopefully in person. We have a free white paper on revenue management for exchanges and other data providers available through the website. Make good use of them, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you, and goodbye, everyone.